Now we're going to be talking about Indian trail marker trees or Native American trail marker trees. This is sort of our ethnobotany segment, if you will. It will not be technical, it will be hopefully inspirational, so we'll find out. So what is a trail marker tree? It's a tree that points a direction to something after getting your attention, and it makes sure that you don't miss it. These, by the way, are not trail marker trees, in case you wondered. So what is a trail marker tree? It's basically these criteria. You need to know that the species is long-lived, traditionally used in the local area. The age has to predate the extirpation of Native American people. The traditional deformations, it needs to be in an open setting, either anthropogenic or natural. It has to point to a meaningful direction. There has to be a reason for it to be there, and any relevant oral history needs to support that. There's a more elaborate and detailed description of this in your handouts, but that in a nutshell is what we're looking for. Most trees that we think are trail trees are going to in some way fail on one or more of these, but there are some that don't, and there were a lot of those that didn't when I was a child, but one by one they're going by the wayside. So think of it as setting your GPS on home. And that's what was done in the 1600s, the 1700s, the 1800s, and some of those trees survived well into the 1900s. A few are still left here and there. Here are some examples taken from the literature of trail marker trees. Most of these are still extant, some are not. This particular tree pointed in two directions, which was a connecting route for a portage between the upper reaches of one river and the upper reaches of another river. If you're canoeing up one, you see this, you get out here, you follow the other branch and go back on that trail tree. This is an old bur oak from a long time ago. This is one that a friend gave me the slide of. It's in Ontario. They were not limited just to Illinois. Illinois and Texas and the Appalachians tended to have a lot of these, but they were elsewhere as well. This one is no longer living, but it's still standing. The trail marker branch used to come over here and go up again. This is in the Wolf area near where we live. Orcasalva again. Ficus grandidentata. This is in Dixon, Tennessee. They weren't always oaks. Occasionally they were hickories or walnuts or beech. But any tree that is not long-lived automatically wouldn't be a trail tree because they had to have survived from pre-settlement times to now and still be alive or visible. This is one in Raleigh, North Carolina. That's me for scale. And often you have trees that either are kinked and grow up again or trees that are arched and grow up. The one we're going to talk about today is one of the arched types. So there are also historic images of some of these trees. The trees are no longer there, but we still have a photographic record of many of them. Early 1900s, this is near Waukegan Road, right in this area, outside of Chicago. Again, that was the two-prong type that would be connecting generally one portage end to another portage end. Another one, this is 1910. This was gone 100 years ago, and many of them are no longer here. This was taken, I believe, in the 1950s. That's also in Lake County, Illinois. Another, this tree is no longer there either, but they thought enough of these back in the early 1900s to put some of these plaques describing what was felt at that time the tree's purpose was. And there was a man, Dr. Jansen, who went around in the early 1900s and visited, over a period of a decade, many states, trying to find these trees, trying to talk to surviving Native American descendants of those who bent them to get information about them. This is just one newspaper picture of him with one of the Native Americans that he's describing this tree. This is courtesy of Ryan Russell. Where's Ryan? Way in the back corner. Throw things at him if you don't like it. This is the walnuts, and it's near the entrance to a cave, a Smullen Cave in Missouri. And of course, right next to it, you can see a building just feet away from the tree, but the tree still survives. This is the lateral view. This is looking along the direction that it pointed. So how did this happen? What takes place when you make a trail marker tree? Well, we have a current photograph of it, and the hand in the picture shows where it was bent. It was kinked over this way. And look closely at the bark as we go. These two vertical portions, notice how the bark is much younger looking than the checkered bark of the rest of this tree. There's a defining line right there and right there. So the original tree did this, was bent over in that fashion. These came up later as sprouts to give the tree a crown again. Those are the points that the original tree had a big top limb here, and the initial terminal was there. They're long since gone. But that's how the tree then regrew. This part died back, this part died back, and these two then grew up. So you have a signal tree that has a cockcomb appearance to it. Some have more branches than this, but that's the arched form of trail marker trees. Now, what's not a trail marker tree? There are a lot of them. This one was just lodged in a windstorm in wet soil. It's a white mulberry. You know, were white mulberries around in 1700s? I don't think so, not in this part of the world. So automatically scratch that off because it totally fails one of those criteria. This is a tree that's 100 years from now one might think was a trail tree, but it actually was broken right there, but not all the way, and it healed over this, and then you can see the sprouts coming back up again. That also is a white mulberry. So we'll always know, even 100 years from now, that that was not a trail tree. These are trees that lodged over in the wind when the surrounding trees were cleared. There was a very thick stand of 40-foot tall oaks. Most of them were taken out. Big snow and wind came along, and the other, just because they didn't have the lateral support, just kind of lodged over. Some of them may straighten up. Some of them may be overtopped by straight trees and disappear, but none of them were trail trees. None of them ever will be, because they'll either straighten up or die in the forest like this. A deer did this. This was a little tree that grew up here. The deer girdled it there, and there was a side branch that then became the new trunk. That's only about 5 inches in diameter, but again, not a trail tree. It was a natural cause. This is just erosion, a tree walking through the forest. This is right at Starkville Forest. Some of you who were on a pre-tour saw this. We call it the sleeping cherry. There was a larger tree right here that this tree was leaning out and crawling on the ground to get away from it, phototropism. That tree was struck by lightning. It's gone. So then the tree said, I have room to grow, and it starts to go vertically. If that had happened to an oak tree in the 1700s and it was still there, you'd think, well, maybe that was a trail tree, and some of them could be that. Here again, this is on Starkville Forest. The main tree bent over a little bit. It grew up. A sucker came up here. If you picture that walnut we saw a few slides ago, this could be very similar. Wild black cherry is maybe 50 years old. This is a sycamore that merely lodged over from creek erosion. The original tree was right here. This part is now dead. It'll be gone in a few years, so we have a tree that comes out and then bends up, but it's just tipping from root erosion. This one, again, this just lodged from a bad root system, and the real hint here is don't park there. Not a good place. So there are also other examples that are obviously not trail trees, but some people think any bent tree has a split tree, a barber chair tree, a tree that the top blew out of, and it has two side branches pointing to no direction at all. You find these everywhere, so don't automatically think, I've got a trail tree. There are a few that can pass a pretty rigorous test. There's no guarantees, but there are a few left. These are not trail trees. Not a one. So we just want to get that out of the way, that not every tree that you see that has some deformation is a trail marker tree. If they pass all those criteria, and they're in your handouts in more detail, like I say, then there's a good chance. You never know for sure. There are many trees that do pass the test, at least to some degree. We're not certain, but all the evidence is there. This one is in Lincoln, Illinois, and Macon County. It doesn't have a strong bend, but it does have a bend that eventually curves out here. Don Seela found this tree and pointed it to me. The form is the weak link. It has the form, but not strongly, but the other links are very strong. It was near Kickapoo Town. Kickapoo Town was right at the tree, which was a Native American village. And there we go. This is a Google map showing the location. This is the Edwards Trace, part of it at least. It's still recognizable. That was one of the very early Native American highways, if you will. The tree is right here next to Edwards Trace. The direction it points is right down to the Great Salt Lick, where the Kickapoo would have come to get salt. So, it's very good circumstantial evidence on that basis that it really was a trail tree, and everybody seems to think it was. Several biologists have looked at it. Historic biologist Bill McLean looked at it and says, yes, he's very confident that was a trail tree. The jury is still out, but the jury is about 11-1 that it was. So here's a true trail tree. By all weights and measures, we feel this is definitely one, and it's Pathfinder. Pathfinder is, again, near our home, near Athens, Illinois. These are just a few shots of the tree, and one with me for scale, trying to hold it up from falling down. We noticed that the tree was very weak at the base. It was cantilevered, so 5 of us got together in 2006 or so, and we tried to stabilize it. We dug down. This was in the winter, but the soil wasn't totally frozen. We poured a footing right under the high point of the arch, right down here, and we put a prop in, anchored to the tree to support it. It was one of those basement solar type props that was not too conspicuous. It was dark in color, but it would keep the thing from falling over, so we thought. Now, you think of connecting with rock stars. The tree obviously is a rock star to tree people, and I've taken a litany of people to view this tree, to climb in this tree, to get their pictures with the tree, to just touch it and be awe-inspired by living history, if you will. And it just goes on and on. I could have had these photos all day long. Not the least of which is one of our award winners from last night, Dirk Benoit. So, Pathfinder, what was its purpose? Well, this is, again, it's a Google map. The Pathfinder tree is there. This is the town of Athens. Star Hill Forest is over here. And this is the Sangamon River, which is a decent-sized river in the central part of the state. This is Rock Creek, which is the little creek that flows through Star Hill Forest, and the confluence is right there, where the river and the creek meet. Now, what happens when a smaller stream and a larger stream meet is there's a differential in flow. After a big rain, the smallest stream swells quickly and then goes back down. The river doesn't swell for several days. Gravel tends to deposit at these confluence areas. If you don't have a bridge and you want to wade the river and you want to avoid quicksand, what do you look for? You look for gravel bars. And this tree pointed with map and compass exactly to this confluence. Probably there were several others in a string that led you to the river. This was the only one left at the time we found it. Bingo. You turn there and you go there. Now, the other thing about this, all these valleys and ravines and everything were wooded, but right up here, this is all prairie soil. We know that was never forest since the last glaciation. Whereas the tree is right on the edge of the woods, where if you're coming across the prairie, you could see it. It's not buried in the woods where you wouldn't see it, and where it might be shaded out anyway, but it's right on the edge. So you see this from a mile away, it's arched that direction. There is my landmark. There's my signpost. So the river and the creek, that's the Sangamon River that we're crossing. This is Rock Creek that feeds into it. That's what we're looking for, is that confluence. Then came the dark day. As I told you, we had this propped up, but we didn't anticipate lateral wind gusts. Late March, early April, derecho basically came along, a very strong wind lateral to the tree. It twisted off the base, off its anchor, and it went down. You can see even today on Google Earth, this is from that year or a year after. This is taken just this spring, but that's the stump of the tree right here. And this is the crown of the tree laying down. That's satellite imagery. If you want to look for that, look south of Athens, Illinois, you can find it. we still take people there. I talked to the landowner. We've just left the tree there. There's one broken limb that I salvaged, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But the rest of the tree is still there. This is a group that's just, again, touching the tree and being inspired, and we'll tell them the history of the tree. This is the person who is doing the Truth About Trees PBS special. It's a 3-part series that was supposed to come out this year. It's probably going to be next year. But we took them there. Ross Spears is the photographer here and the lead man for the story. And while he was photographing, doing video, the wrens were singing, the birds were flying around and so forth. And this little broken end right here, before we got out of my truck and went over there, he was looking out the window photographing this, and this little guy came out. A coyote pup who had, the den was actually inside the hollow. So the tree lives on in so many ways. I'm betting that that's going to make the cut. I can no guarantees, but I can't imagine them not including that. And if you want to follow that series when it does come out, this is the flyer about it. Just look up the Truth About Trees in your Google search, and you'll find that. So when the tree fell, it was still dormant season, barely. Obviously now I had access to the top of the tree on the ground. I found some vigorous vertical growing signwood, and we collected some. There it is. Ryan Russell helped us graft some. We tried several grafters. He was the one who was successful. And we now have, we now have Pathfinder trees growing in our nursery. They will be grafted, and we are using Forest Keeling here in the U.S. and Pavia Nursery in Belgium for Europe to promote these and get these out to people who are interested in Native American history. It's just a white oak, but it has all this provenance. We'll never get rich on it, but I just want to make sure that somebody has this. Someone like Dan Kaiser, who was interested in Native American history, would probably want one of these to plant. Maybe in 15 years he would bend it over. Maybe not, but just knowing that's where it came from and it's the original genotype, bingo. If you want to learn more about Pathfinder tree and other native, trail trees, there is some literature. There are some online sites. Some are better than others. Some are more spectacular than others. Some of them take more liberties than others. But a cross-section will get you a lot of things. Dennis Downs wrote a book about basically eastern North America. The Wells family is working in the Appalachians. There are 2 different groups in Texas who are working on trying to resolve trail trees or potential trail trees in their areas. And you can also find things in print. The Illinois Steward magazine did a big article, Bill McLean, about trail trees. And by the way, that's Pathfinder that he used in his frontispiece. This article was strictly about Pathfinder. You have both of these as your handouts. They'll give you a lot more information than I've been able to this morning. So finally, who in here is an award winner from last night? Nobody? Oh, there's one. There's one. They're all bashful. They just sort of put their hands up, raise them high, be proud. The wood that was made into your award was from Pathfinder. The one limb that I did harvest for special purposes was used to make these awards. So the only problem is my name should be up here.